Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Tonight we have a special treat. I'm actually going to read two short stories tonight. These stories are from a collection of African American folk tales for young readers. I will send a link to this book in the description below. African American folk tales. Um, we'll be reading the tonight. We'll be reading two stories: the Sizimweh and Mr. Frog rides Mr. Elephant. First, the sim wiz this what is it? The Sizimweh. The Sizimweh. This story is retold from the folklore of one of the groups of Tonga-speaking people of Zimbabwe. A group of girls went down to the river to fish with their fish baskets. A young boy, who had no duties around his home that day, followed them, for many of them were friends of his older sister. Although the girls usually tolerated the boy's presence, today they told him to go back to the village and leave them alone. They went on down the path and along the river, trying to get away from the lonely boy. Each time they stopped to fish, they saw him following them. They went further from the village than they had ever gone before, and stepped out into the shallow river and began to catch fish. The boy came and sat on the river bank and watched them. After a few minutes, a storm blew in, and heavy rain began to fall. The girls ran toward the opposite bank, away from the direction of the blowing rain. The boy stood and waved his arms at them. "Don't go to that side of the river," he called. "The Sizimweh lives over there." The girls paid no attention, for they did not believe in the Sizimweh, the beast who comes and kills by night and can eat many cattle or people at one sitting. The girls took shelter under a large tree and laughed at the boy and the rain. The boy swam across the river and sat with them. When the rain stopped, the girls were curious and began to walk away from the river along a wide pathway. The boy looked at the path and said, "See how wide this path is. It was not made by men, but by a beast." The girls only laughed and walked on. They came to a great hut with a wide doorway. The boy said, "See how wide this doorway is. It was not made for men, but for a beast." The girls laughed and walked to the door and called. No one answered, and the girls went in. The great hut was decorated with the skins of every animal, and skulls and horns hung from wall to wall. The boy said, "See the big game here? They were not hunted by men, but by a beast." The girls were impressed, but they thought that the hut was that of a great warrior, and imagined marrying such a man. They built a fire, cooked the fish, and ate supper. When the girls fell asleep, the boy shut the door to the great hut. He slept just inside it. In the middle of the night, the Sizimweh came home and found his door shut. Even the Sizimweh obeys the polite customs, so he called for whoever was inside to open the door. The boy refused to open the door. The Sizimweh pushed the door over and stepped in. He sniffed the air with huge sniffs, drooled at the smell of humans, and said, in a voice like the growl of a lion, "Let me have one of these girls to eat." "No," said the brave boy. "These are my people, and you will not eat them." The beast snorted, but backed out the doorway politely. When the sun came up and the girls awoke, the boy asked, "Did you not hear him? Did you not see him? The Sizimweh came at midnight." The girls laughed and said the boy had dreamed it all. The girls went down to the river to fish, and the boy went to the trees and cut a trunk to carve a drum. Instead of going home that night, the girls went back to the great hut with the skulls and horns, still hoping to meet a great warrior. They cooked their fish, and the boy brought in the drum he had carved. He took a skin off the wall and made the drum head. That night, the girls slept on mats as before. The boy put the door back in its frame and shut it. He slept on the dirt just inside the door. At midnight, the Sizimweh came home and found the door shut. He called for the boy to open the door. The boy again refused to open the door, and sang and played his drum as his answer. The drum woke the girls, who lay very still. The Sizimweh pushed the door over and stepped in. He sniffed the air with huge sniffs and drooled at the smell of human beings. The beast spoke in a voice like the low call of an elephant. "Let me have one of these girls to eat." "No," said the brave boy. "These are my people, and you will not eat them." The beast snarled, but backed out politely. When the sun came up, the boy asked, "Did you not hear him? Did you not see him?" The girls answered that they had heard him and seen him. The boy told the girls to hide in the drum. The girls made themselves small and got in the drum to hide. The boy left, carrying the drum with him. The Sizimweh came back to the great hut as the sun rose, and with him came his many meat-eating friends, lions, wild dogs, leopards, and hyenas. They walked all around the hut sniffing. All they could smell was the fish, cooked the night before. They accused the Sizimweh of being mistaken, and of having smelled fish instead of human beings. Then the hyenas found the tracks of the boy, and the beasts all went out and tracked him to the river. They overtook him, and asked where all the girls were. "There are no girls here, just me and my drum," said the boy. He began to play the drum, and the girls inside sang a very pretty song. All the animals stood up on their back legs and began to dance. After the dance, the animals thanked the boy for playing for them. Then they turned on the Shizimwe and called him a liar. They killed him and tore his flesh and ate him. The boy ran to the river and held the heavy drum over his head as he waded across. Back at the village, the girls came out of the drum and made themselves their true sizes again. They all thanked the boy, and after that, when the boy played his drum, all the village came to listen and sing and dance, and the girls never tried to chase that boy away again. The Sizimweh. Now I'm going to read Mr. Frog Rides Mr. Elephant. Retold from the folklore and inspired by the stories of Tyrone Wilkerson, this is a story from the people of Angola. It became Mr. Rabbit Fools Mr. Fox, or Brother Rabbit Tricks Brother Fox in the American South. So we see here that the stories adapt from culture to culture and they change as they go. This is the African tale. Mr. Frog rides Mr. Elephant. Sitting along the river bank, the frogs were talking. Mr. Frog began to brag about how important he was. "Hippopotamus is my personal servant," he claimed, lying, and Mr. Elephant is my personal riding mount. All the little frogs laughed and showed that they didn't believe Mr. Frog. Miss Frog, who had no husband, seemed impressed, and she said, "You may come to call at my house tomorrow, Mr. Frog. I hope you will come riding your personal riding mount." Mr. Frog realized he had bragged way too much, and he swallowed hard. Gulp. Then Miss Frog hopped home, and the little frogs who had been listening laughed again and hopped away. Mr. Frog wondered how he could impress Miss Frog, whom he wanted to marry. "Gulp," he said. The next morning Mr. Elephant came to the river bank to get a drink, and the little frogs started laughing at him. "Peep, peep, peep." "What are you laughing at, little frogs?" said Mr. Elephant sternly. "Mr. Frog said you were his personal riding mount," said the little frogs. "He told it to Miss Frog." Mr. Elephant twitched his tail and flapped his big ears a little. Did he?" he asked. He did, he did, he did," peeped the little frogs. "I'll teach him to mock me," said Mr. Elephant, turning and walking down the bank, swinging his trunk. Mr. Frog saw Mr. Elephant coming and was afraid. "Gulp," he said. Quickly, Mr. Frog flopped over on his back like he was dead. Mr. Elephant came right up to him and bumped him with his trunk. "Get up, Mr. Frog," said Mr. Elephant. "I can't, Mr. Elephant," said Mr. Frog. "I'm much too sick. I ate a bug that poisoned me. I'm dying." "Get up, Mr. Frog," said Mr. Elephant. "We're going to Miss Frog's house, and you're going to set the record straight." "I'm too sick. I'm dying. Don't make me go." "Get up, Mr. Frog, and we'll go set the record straight before you die." "I'm too sick. I can't hop." "I'll carry you," said Mr. Elephant. "You'll drop me," said Mr. Frog. "I couldn't go unless I rode upon your neck." "I'll pick you up and put you on my neck," said Mr. Elephant impatiently. "I'm too sick. I'd fall off. I couldn't ride you without a hoda, a riding seat like Mr. Camel wears," said Mr. Frog, still lying on his back. "I'll make a hoda," said Mr. Elephant, and he went to the bush and pulled down a vine with a gourd on it. He hid the gourd against the trunk of a tree with his own trunk. The gourd broke in half and looked like a hoda. Mr. Elephant plodded back to the river bank and tossed his trunk up and dropped the vine over his neck. Mr. Frog got up very feebly and tied the vine under Mr. Elephant's wrinkled chin. Then Mr. Elephant lifted Mr. Frog on his trunk and set him on his neck. Mr. Frog hopped merrily into the half-gourd hoda and sat up like a prince. Mr. Elephant lumbered along the river bank until he came to Miss Frog's house. Miss Frog looked out and saw Mr. Frog riding high and proud in the half-gourd hoda. She was very impressed. "Hold it, Mr. Elephant!" cried Mr. Frog to his riding mount. Mr. Elephant stopped. "Let me down!" called Mr. Frog. Mr. Elephant lifted Mr. Frog out of the half-gourd hoda and lowered him to the ground. Mr. Frog hopped over into Miss Frog's house. Mr. Elephant stood outside, swaying from side to side, waiting. Inside, Mr. Frog explained to Miss Frog that indeed he was a very prominent member of the riverbank community, and that indeed Mr. Elephant was his personal riding mount. Then he asked Miss Frog to become his bride. She agreed. Mr. Frog said he would go home and return the following day. He hopped back out and called, "Up, Mr. Elephant!" Mr. Elephant lifted him into the half-gourd hoda and turned and walked slowly back along the river bank. Mr. Frog turned and waved to Miss Frog, who watched him go with deep admiration. Back at his house, Mr. Frog called to be put down. "I told Miss Frog all about you and me. I set the record straight," he said, as he hopped off Mr. Elephant's trunk. Mr. Elephant took the vine in his trunk, yanked it off, and threw it in the river. "I'll just go inside and die now, Mr. Elephant," said Mr. Frog. "Goodbye." "I hope you learned your lesson," said Mr. Elephant with a snort. Then he raised his trunk and trumpeted. He tramped off into the bush. Mr. Frog took all his belongings and burned his house and started off for the village of Miss Frog's family, singing as he went. Mr. Frog rides Mr. Elephant. Thank you so much for listening. Good night, everybody.